Hey everybody, this is Boris Kodjoe, and guess what? Today I have the distinct honor to be coined the man of the hour.
Boris Kodjoe. Now that name holds a lot of weight, and that's because this Hollywood TV, film, and Broadway actor has not only defined what it means to use your platform for good, but to build a legacy with his work and philanthropy. We're in for a treat with this one. It's time to learn more about Boris because he's here with me right now. Where do you really see 2020, fitting in your book moving forward? How has it been for you?
Justin, I talked to my kids this morning actually, and we agreed that there's really three pandemics going on. You have the viral pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. You have the economic pandemic that is a direct result of the first pandemic. And then you have the third pandemic, which is the social justice and equality pandemic that has been going on for way longer than any of the other pandemics, but has gotten or picked up steam or pace in these past months because of some of the events that have taken place in the past couple of months, whether it's the death of George Floyd or what Amy Cooper did in Central Park, and really the connectivity of all those things and how people started being able to connect the dots between the two events and the multiple events really, and how the world really has picked up the ball and made such a collective, powerful statement that we've had it and that there has to be some tangible and sustainable change. So 2020 is a juggernaut of a year in that many respects. And I'm somebody who likes to look at the silver lining, and I think with those pandemics happening at the same time, and then you add a buffoon in the White House to the mix who has been preaching his divisive politics for the past 4 years. I think that, again, this all sort of is culminating in a huge change that humanity is now facing. And to me, it's an opportunity to be better collectively and individually, and to learn from our mistakes and to take the ball and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, to everything you just said, I completely agree. But the ball that you guys seem to be running with too, especially with the foundation like the one you already had prior to these three pandemics, it seemed like you all kind of hit the ground running essentially when all of this started to happen. I think it was COVID first. I mean, the racial injustice is a problem that we've had for so many years, but then it's brought to full light right after the pandemic and stay-at-home orders were put into play. And there's a ripple effect essentially that we're all feeling together. But I wanted to bring some light to one of your silver lining methods here, which is always giving back to people. And we mentioned that, there's so much philanthropic work. As a fan like me, Boris, I've been watching you on TV for a long time, and I didn't necessarily know as a viewer how much work you and your family put into your foundation, and then all the initiatives that you guys have, one of which was the #HelpOurHeroes initiative that you all actually helped to provide over 500 masks already with your wife Nicole's gym wrap. And so that alone, I think, just says a lot about where you all not only hit the ground running, but essentially ran with it and just kind of did whatever you all could do. And that's not even one reason, right, why we think you're today's man of the hour. But the best part of doing something like that for the frontliners, at least, and then we'll hit the other areas of the pandemic as well in this conversation. But I want to start with our frontliners because there was so much scare at the beginning of it that I think people were just nervous to act at all. Like, do I leave my house? Do I try to donate money? Do I make masks? But the work that you all have done has kind of encompassed all of that. So when you think of how much work you all have done for the frontliners together, and then you guys, even more so with the health and educational aspect to everything going on in multicultural communities, have built the new fitness app, CoFit. So it's like the amount of work you guys have done since 2020 this this era, right, that's felt like 10 years, this era of 2020 has brought a lot of bad news to us, but you guys have brought a lot of good news in the press beside it. So what has all that been like?
Well, I can't take credit for that. My wife came up with the idea to pivot and start manufacturing masks to help our essential workers and our real heroes who, like you said, beautifully, who are working tirelessly on the front line. And so I want to thank everybody out there who understood the importance of supporting these essential workers and first responders who have been putting their own lives at risk and their safety on the line to help us and protect us. And so that was to us the least that we could do, and we were really just the catalyst for the love and support that came from people out there who wanted to support these essential workers and frontliners. And I'm super thankful that we were able to create this outlet to make sure that we support those who are the real heroes here during this pandemic. And in terms of COVID, it's just a natural extension of who we are as a family. My brother's an ex basketball pro, and he's a trainer, a certified nutritionist, and a life coach. His wife is a life coach and a yoga instructor and a breath work instructor. And health and wellness, or health and fitness, has always been a part of our lives, and that's how we raise our children. My daughter had some health challenges that she's been facing since she was born, and so we were always very conscious of the things we needed to do in order to give her the highest quality of life and to give her a strong immune system and a strong body. And the same with my son. He's an athlete, and he's very aware of what he needs to do in order to be the best he can be. So we wanted to give people the tools to introduce some healthy habits into their lives, because for me, diets and routines don't work because they're not sustainable. If you tell somebody who's never worked out to do 50 push-ups and squats, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. If you tell somebody who loves ice cream to stop eating ice cream forever, that's crazy. It's not sustainable. So you have to go at your own pace. And with COVID, we meet people where they are, and we teach them to use baby steps in the right direction so that you can create these healthy habits and introduce some of these new patterns into your life to make it a part of your lifestyle. And that's really when the change happens, right? When you make something a part of your life, depending on your schedule, depending on your means, depending on your family, how your setup is, and what your lifestyle is. We all have so many different responsibilities. We have multiple jobs. We juggle work and home life and children, and there's single parents out there. There's a lot of challenges, especially right now during this pandemic, where people are afraid to not only lose their jobs and their home. People are struggling to put food on the table. So in these times, looking at health and wellness seems to be not part of the priority. But when you understand that your physical and your spiritual and your mental well-being equips you with the tools to handle whatever comes at you better, then you can make it part of your life, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, even if it's just getting up in the morning, making your bed, putting your clothes on, and walking around the block or walking around the house. Every time you do something that you set your mind to doing, you experience a sense of accomplishment. That's an experience of success that then bleeds into your everyday life. That's your relationships, your performance at work. And in challenging times like these, to have a sense of accomplishment, even if it's over something that's as trivial as brushing your teeth, or sitting down for 2 minutes and closing your eyes and observing your breathing, as in a meditation, it helps you deal with these in these uncertain times. So that's the idea behind COVID. Something that helps you deal, that helps you become healthier day by day, baby steps. And it doesn't require you to spend a lot of money or use equipment or go to the gym or do anything extraordinary that you can't do right now. All you need is a little bit of space in your house and 2 minutes or 5 minutes in your day, and it can have an impact on your life, a positive impact.
I love that you bring up earlier with the unsustainability note on, asking someone to do push-ups and telling someone they should eat certain foods and whatever that might look like. But there's a level of investment with this too. 2 minutes a day, working out, 2 minutes a day, reading a history book, the right history book, 2 minutes a day, going on a walk and clearing your head, 10 minutes a day, taking a nap and just clearing your head. There's a lot going on right now, Boris, and I'm really glad you bring up that we can all be doing something, little or small. I think you're on a grand scale, my friend, when it comes to the things you're doing, but I think a lot of us are trying to be like that as well. But even on the smaller note, you mentioned that you guys, especially your wife, but you all have been doing what you could to help frontliners. Now I want to pivot here and talk a little bit about the racial injustice issues we're having in the country and really figure out how we can take baby steps, and just your opinion, your thoughts on this, but what could we be doing on a daily basis to really move in the right direction as people who are not of color and people who have not experienced racial injustice? And then ultimately, you brought this up too, making it a part of your life moving forward. And I think that's at the core of what the problem might be, is that there's a unwillingness of acceptance sometimes when it comes to dealing with racial injustice and many other issues our country has. But for timing purposes, and especially with everything going on right now, where are your thoughts on what we can be doing, a couple of minutes a day or, every day?
I think this is such a pivotal point in our history that people that are not of color, people who are not essentially affected by systemic racism, need to start listening. They need to start learning, and they need to start being accountable. And what I mean by that is stop turning your head because you think it doesn't affect you. Taking responsibility for our real collective history of these past 400 years. And what I mean by that is show interest in acknowledging the history and how history has informed the way you live today. Meaning for instance, the tremendous wealth gap that we are experiencing today was created, or the basis of it, the foundation of it was created 400 years ago through slave labor. And the mechanisms of systemic racism that kept people of color, Black people, down and benefited white people, in very simple terms. So acknowledging that fact is the beginning of not just taking a stance, but being anti-racist and to help being a part of the solution. That's where it starts. So listening, learning, and being accountable for what happened and not turning your head. I think that's where it starts. And we have to have these uncomfortable conversations, this dialogue that has been ignored too long. Why are we as Black people the only ones talking about this when we aren't the ones who invented racism in the first place, right? Our forefathers were kidnapped, put on ships, and taken over here against their will. They were robbed of their freedom. They were robbed of their rights. They were robbed of their names, of their language, of their culture, of their rituals, religious rituals. And now we are the ones dealing with this on our own. We're dealing with the generational trauma. We're dealing with the generational wealth gap. We're dealing with disadvantages in terms of social justice, education, economy, housing. Those are all aspects of systemic racism that we have to deal with. But it wasn't an invention of ours. We were forced in that position. So it's very important that, especially white people understand that taking accountability, being responsible, doesn't mean that you are admitting to to actively being racist. It means that you don't that you do not conduct, that you do not support, that you do even more, that you are absolutely against this system, this systemic racism, the racism that has plagued us for the past 400 years, and that you are identifying yourself as being a part of the solution. And I think that's the difference between what we're experiencing now and what has happened in the past in circumstances like with Mike Brown 4 years ago, or other occasions where we were subjected to police violence, and all the way down to the 60s and the civil rights movement, that finally white people understand their role, the role that they've played in the past generations, and how they have contributed to this systemic racism, not just surviving, but thriving. And I think that's the difference that we're experiencing right now, that people are actually speaking up who aren't traditionally affected by what's going on. And that's when we can take advantage of this moment and steer the boat in the right direction. And the world has responded. I mean, looking at the news, I mean, everywhere, Paris, London, all over the world, people have, stepped out on the street and lent their voice to this cause, because it's been way too long and something needs to change. And this sustainable change, this tangible, real, permanent change will just make us all better. It'll make us all stronger. It'll make the economy stronger. Everybody wins when there's social justice and equality.
Your wisdom is unlike anybody else's, Boris, and that's why I'm glad I was able to ask you those two questions to start this conversation. I think one of many reasons we look up to you for so long has been, or we've looked up to you for so long rather, has been because you've managed to successfully execute in your career, given, you just mentioned, the generational trauma, the unfortunate discrepancy between you and another person who might have been going for that same acting job due to their skin color and yours. And there's a great deal of light to be shed on the entertainment industry in that regard. And I think that's why I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. I do want to, first of all, thank you for all of that. But I want to ask you now about acting, because certainly, I mean, I've been watching you for a long time. A lot of us have been watching you for a very long time. And when we think about you and who we've seen on television, who we've seen in theater, I'd be damned if I didn't tell you one of the many reasons we admire your work is because you're so relatable, given all the roles that you've accepted these roles. It's not like they say, hey, Boris, go do this. And you're like, yeah, sure, whatever the role is. You know what that role is going into it. And we can tell when you act, Boris Kodjoe, that you intentionally wanted to play that role. From my favorite, Medea's Family Reunion, I mean, that was many years ago, right? But now we're looking at you on Station 19, House of Cards, Code Black, the list goes on. But when you're thinking about acting and how intentional you are with not only your decisions to play that role, but your intentionality behind being so relatable to audiences of all kinds, Where did the love of acting even come from? And then now that you're looking back on your acting career with us now, you know, all of that just mentioned, where does all that sit in your head now?
You know, I've been lucky. I've been really fortunate to get some of the breaks that I've gotten. You know, 20 years in the business now, starting with Soul Food and Love and Basketball and Brown Sugar and you know, moments that I look back to fondly, because you know, every project that you take on represents a different moment in your life. Medea's Family Reunion is a great example because it was the first movie I did after I became a father, which was a huge deal for me. So I look back at these projects as, you know, very special moments in my life, in very special circumstances. I try to learn on every job, from every person I meet, you know, whether that's a person on set or, you know, behind the scenes or behind the camera or in front of the camera. I love the human interaction. I love being around people. I love, you know, having that exchange and you know, getting to know people. It's one of the great privileges that I have being in this industry, that I meet a lot of interesting people. That's also why I love traveling. You know, my family and I, we travel a lot. That's sort of the luxury that we enjoy, meeting different people, getting to know different cultures and traveling to different, you know, countries. But at the same time, I realize how fortunate I am and how lucky I have been. And I don't take myself too seriously in terms of, you know, the thesp that I am. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to play make-believe, right? To put on different clothes and act like somebody else. So I'm not a you know, genius scientist. I'm not somebody who can change the world. I'm lucky that I can touch people's lives in a way that, you know, might make them smile or laugh and make them feel something, maybe improve their day. But again, I'm so blessed that I've been able to do this for such a long time and meet such incredible people. I met my wife on the first job I ever had in Soul Food. I mean, that's the biggest blessing in my life right there. And then having 2 children with her. So again, I really keep a pretty healthy perspective on things, and I know how lucky I am. And I just hope that, you know, I can touch a few lives here and there, make people smile, laugh, and enjoy what we're doing. But anything beyond that would be very self-congratulatory.
Since you're not going to congratulate yourself, I'm going to congratulate you. I love that you bring up you don't take yourself too seriously. I think I've often lived by this, and I'm far, just entered this business per se, but there's a level of humility that I think needs to come with people who strive for a very long, successful career that they want to hold longevity in. And part of that is just not taking yourself seriously, taking your work seriously, understanding the impact that you have on audiences. And you also brought up the fact that you don't have the power to change the world. Part of the reason I started this podcast is because I believe you do. And I know that listeners and audiences who watch this clip, who are listening to this podcast, can take everything you've said in just the last 30 minutes and do something with that will be life-changing. Therefore, the grander prize in that, and again, you're not going to say this, but I will, the grander prize in that is to congratulate you on the fact that you are changing lives. Pardon the interruption, my friends. I know he's saying a lot of great things, but I want you to know that the episode you're watching is proudly presented by Manscaped, who's the best in men's below-the-waist grooming, and we all know that in order to be the best version of yourself, you gotta be sure you're well-groomed all around. Manscaped has spent 18 months perfecting this new ball hair trimmer 3.0, and I want you guys to try it for yourself because, to be honest with you, I love it. Be sure to head to manscaped.com and use the code MOTH20 for 20% off and free shipping. That's MOTH20 at manscaped.com. Your balls and your partner will thank you later. Let's get back to the episode, my friends. More on acting, Boris. I got to ask you about Hollywood because there's a lot of misconceptions about getting in the acting world. And for those listening who are interested in entertainment or who happen to want to be some type of personality on screen or what have you, when you're thinking about acting and landing roles and getting the best fit part for you, and you mentioned this, right? You're playing somebody else ultimately, but I feel like in Hollywood, the reason I bring up the misconception sometimes is that there's this mold you might have to fit when working in this business. And so for you, how have you managed to navigate and hopefully avoid that your entire career when you're thinking about fitting a mold, being somebody you don't really want to be, or ultimately being somebody that you're not?
Well, you know, Hollywood is not a very creative place. It's that's why it's called show business and not show creative. And a lot of decisions are made based on algorithms, numbers, data, and that data tends to be very systematic in terms of how you're pigeonholed and stereotyped, and they put you in a box. And then executives are very risk averse, so they don't want to take a risk on somebody or something. So they like to do something that the person who held the job before them did, so that if it works out, they can take the credit, and if it doesn't, they can blame the guy before them. So it's really up to you to try to be as daring and adventurous as possible. And so I like to take on things that scare me. I like to step out on faith and do things that others might say aren't the most obvious choice to make, because it keeps things interesting, and it challenges you to a point where you can sort of extend your boundaries and your horizon gets wider, which benefits you as a person, as a human being, as a man, right? So, and I've learned that definitely in the past 20 years, that I have to be courageous, and I have to step out on faith, and I have to trust myself, and then face the consequences. And sometimes it turns out great, and sometimes it doesn't turn out so great. And again, it speaks to the overall attitude that I have about things that I can control and things that I cannot control. I don't worry about things I cannot control. I worry about myself and how I conduct myself, how I prepare, how professional I am, how I treat other people. And anything beyond that is out of my control, so I don't really worry about it too much.
Again, I'm glad you say that. You know what's interesting? You're saying a lot of the things that my brother and my dad always say, and I like that. And that's why I brought you on here. It's not necessarily like I could have been a super fan of your shows and movies and Broadway acting, but ultimately you're saying a lot of the things that I had a feeling you would be saying, because how do you go so long in a career being what we see as successful and what we see as admirable, and we, again, to congratulate you, but really, how can you go that far in your career without having this much wisdom? And that's why I'm so glad you're sharing it with us. And, it's interesting enough that there are always going to be good and bad days in the line of work that all of us do. You could be working at a grocery store. You could be like me and trying to, do a podcast, right? You could be acting, right? One gig to the next. And I think there's always going to be good and bad days. But what would you say has been one of your hardest days, and what got you through it all these years, if you can think of one moment?
Oh man, the journey is made up of hard days and not so hard days, and I found that the hardest days are those who you learn the most from. People say you either win or you learn. And I think as long as you embrace those hard days and you embrace your mistakes and you embrace your failures, you get back up and you learn from them. Eventually, you look back and you have a interesting story to tell. Really, my father-in-law says that. It says you know, the hard times are the most important because it makes the story better in the end. Right? Otherwise, it would be boring. You know, when you're in that moment, it's tough. You know, when you're on the ground, when you're sitting on your butt and you fell down again, maybe you fell down over and over and over again, and you're tired and you're exhausted and you don't know what's wrong. And those are the moments that really define who you are. I've had many moments that weren't the best, and it's not just about things that happen to you. You know, it's about how you conducted yourself, decisions you made. I made some terrible choices in my life that affected other people that I love, and I had to face myself. You know, I had to look at myself. I had to ask myself how I got here. I had to, you know, be accountable and figure out where that came from. I had to figure out what some of the patterns were that led me to this point. So I could change it. I could change and replace some of those patterns and paradigms that have been in my head and in my psyche for 40 years, right? Because our hard drives are made up in our first 6 or 7 years of our lives, and after that, it's all about software, right? The hardware is set. So when those paradigms are set in there for so many years, it's very hard to recognize how it affects your behavior, your relationships, and it's also very hard to replace them. And you can only replace them if you continuously work at it. It's like practice. You can't just say, oh, there's a pattern that I don't like, I'm just going to lift it out. No, you can't do that. You have to replace that paradigm with something different and then start behaving in a different way. And those are the most painful and the hardest lessons to learn, because it takes a lot of effort on your part to recognize it, then make a decision that you want to change it, and then actually put forth the work it takes to change some of those patterns. So that's also something that the pandemic has brought with it, because it's given us a lot of time. It's given us a lot of time to be stationary, to think, to read, to go inside and figure out some of the things that you don't like about yourself and work on those. So these past 6 months have been eye-opening to me personally, because there's a lot of things that I was able to address with myself, with my wife, with my children, that I understand now I can do better. And that's been really impactful to me and my family. The fact that we can identify things that we don't like about ourselves, and we can actually change them. When you make that a priority, it gives you a whole new sense of self and sense of accomplishment about yourself. So those are some of the things that I think are important to sort of check in on sometimes as you grow and as you progress through your life and as you progress through your career, because, you know, some of the patterns definitely impact the way you deal with other people, the way you perform in your careers. And so these few months have really helped me recalibrate, if you will.
And then recalibrating for all of us too. This 6 months is a long time to be stationary, staying at home. All of our jobs look different, and thank God we still have them. There's almost too much going on at this point that we should not be missing out on or being blind to externally. But then to your point about understanding yourself more, what you could be doing better, there's a great sense of well-being that can come along this journey too. I mean, you don't want to look back at a time like this in your life. I know a lot of us are going to think, hey, 2020 low-key didn't really happen, but it did. And it happened the
Oh,
way
yeah.
that it did because some things we couldn't control. You can't necessarily control a huge disease that gets infected by people, but you can control that, something was brought to light, like the racial injustice,
Mm,
not even a movement, the matter at hand, that's been at hand for a long time. And I mean, I think a lot of us would be ignorant to not try to work on ourselves during this time, which is why the Men of the Hour podcast is actually listed under self-improvement, because I too, Boris, have taken a lot of time to think about what could I be doing better with the
mm,
skill set that I have, with the ambitions that I have,
mm,
connections that we have, whatever that might be. Like, where is your heart sitting? And then going from there and figuring out how you can tactfully execute what you should be doing during this time. And so
mm.
I bring that up because I want to know, I speak on behalf of a lot of us when I ask this, but we're often wondering what it would even take to build an organic and authentic career like the one that you've built, especially right now when we have a lot of time to start thinking about what those things could look like and what tangible things we could be doing day in and day out. But where would you say one could even begin, and then ultimately, sustain?
I think we live in a very funny time because of social media and the internet and how it's sort of infected us and our perception of ourselves and the world. And I think that it's polluted us in a way that has taken away from our fantasy, from our own imagination, from our own passions and dreams, because we're too busy looking to the right and to the left than to really focus on our own path. So I always try to remind people that, again, you are on your own path and you're walking that path on your own pace, at your own pace. And you don't owe anybody else an explanation as to why are you walking your path and how. This is your script. You are the star of your own movie. And it takes time. Another, detrimental preconceived notion that people have about life is that it has to match, the lives of some of the people that we follow on Instagram, and some of the so-called billionaires when they're 23 years old. First of all that stuff is fake. And then again, it takes time to discover who you are. It takes time to figure out what your interests are and where your passions lie, and where you want to go in life, and what you want to experience. And especially kids in their 20s have no idea about anything. I couldn't tie my own shoe when I was 20, but I thought I knew everything, and I still don't know half of it. I still don't know anything. So I think once you understand that, and you take your time and you put one foot in front of the other, and you open your eyes to the world, and you become an active participant in your life, in the world, at some point you will be able to find out who you are. And then beyond that, you will find your path and your purpose in life. And once that sets in, you're off and running. I think we just put too much pressure on ourselves to figure all this stuff out in our early 20s, just based on what social media tells us. And it's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. Just enjoy the journey and take your time, and know you do not have to abide by the schedule and the timelines of other people, of what you think other people would expect from you. No, this is your life. And you got to live it the way you do, and the way you want to.
I wish I could arise with those sound effects of people just clapping their hands after you were to walk off stage saying something like that, Boris, because it's true. I'm in my 20s, and there's a lot of pressure that people are putting on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You would think someone like me would say there's a lot of pressure people are putting on me. It's the opposite. You put it on
Oh,
yourself, and
that's
then other
rarely
people.
that's rarely that's rarely the case. That's
Right.
rarely the case. We say that, but the pressure really comes from ourselves.
Right. I don't want this interview to end, but there's that saying that every good thing comes to an end. So my ending question for you, as today's man of the hour, what legacy do you really hope to leave behind right now? Not saying, Boris Kodjoe is not going anywhere. Okay. Let me make that very clear. I made that mistake before with one guest. They were like, am I dying tomorrow? What legacy do you really hope to be building right now that you trust will enhance and inspire future generations?
If I'm lucky that I can inspire somebody, that's icing on the cake. But my true legacy, I think, is embodied by my children. How I raise, how I love, how I support, how I empower my children. I think that's really the ultimate prize for me, just to be able to watch them grow into human beings who are kind, who are passionate, who are considerate, and who are aware. That's number one to me. Everything else comes secondary. So that would be my legacy. And now, if I can touch some people and inspire some folks and make some mindful and conscious choices that can help others, that would definitely make me feel good about myself. I want people to, when they think about me, I want them to think that I'm somebody who maximizes potential, who was happy, who was blessed and knew he was blessed, and who acknowledged his faults as much as he acknowledged his strengths. Because that's who I want to be. I want to be a three-dimensional person. I want to be somebody who is comfortable with being uncomfortable, because only when you're uncomfortable can there be change, right? And I just recently learned to embrace that, that change is a good thing. We all change biologically, physiologically, we change, and we change because of our environment, because of the relationships that we build. And so being comfortable with being uncomfortable, to me, is a sign of growth and progress. I would like to add that to my set of qualities, if you will.
Set of qualities they are. Boris Kodjoe, I would be lying if I didn't say it was a milestone getting you on this podcast to say everything you've said so openly and candidly about your career, all the things that you've done with your career and then outside with your philanthropic work that we can't thank you enough for. And I think, again, sharing your wisdom is something that I know is going to help future generations. And so I'd be damned too if I didn't say congratulations on your entire career thus far. But good luck with everything as well. And I wish you nothing but the healthiest and safest future for the rest of this year and then into the brand new year, which I hope brings a lot more understanding, competency, and, good news for the world. And I think it will after this year comes by. So thank you. Again, we appreciate what you, the Kodjoe Family Foundation, is doing day in and day out. And thank you for being today's Man of the Hour.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate your time. All the best to you.
Justin Crawford here, and I'll be back next week with another great guest on the Men of the Hour podcast. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review right here and anywhere else you'd like to listen. Also, check out our Instagram and YouTube channels when you get a chance and see the full video interviews with our guests at Men of the Hour podcast. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and make a positive change for yourself and those around you.